Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to our event today in partnership with Vitality and Peppy. My name is Jamie and I'm a physiologist and part of the coaching team at Vitality. First things first, thanks so much for choosing to spend your afternoon with us today. I think that we're discussing a topic which affects millions of people globally, and your first thought might be, why is a 30-year-old male hosting this conversation? And I think that's a good question to ask, but ultimately we all play a role in this topic, and with my background in physiology, I think nutrition is something that is a key part of lots of different parts of elements of people's health. So it's one that I want to share the message from a male perspective, but we also obviously have a huge audience at the moment which are female, and we have an expert which is going to help you with that. But just a little bit of context around this topic and why I think it's such an important one and an emotive one. I think menopause symptoms are really unique, and although they can appear across a broad range of ages, the average age tends to be somewhere between sort of 45 and 55. And many people approaching or going through the menopause transition, they do complain a lot more about carrying weight around the middle, feeling less toned, gaining more weight, even though they haven't changed anything to do with their diet and their lifestyle. And there are legitimate reasons for this physiologically. But before we get into the content of this session and I introduce our guest, I think it's really worthwhile explaining our approach to weight management at Vitality. Because before this event, we have received some feedback regarding the sensitivity of this topic and whether we should be talking about weight management given the close connections with mental well-being. And this is definitely something that we're extremely conscious of. You'll notice actually that in the title, for example, we haven't spoken about weight loss or weight gain. We do understand the challenges everyone faces and that each individual situation is different. And what my advice to everyone, and I'd really strongly encourage it, is that you apply everything we're talking about today to your own experiences. The facts are actually that this is an issue for so many people. And I think we pride ourselves on being experts. And what we really want to do is share content to help and educate people rather than to shame or to preach. So I think that's something that we really want to clarify. And self-awareness and an understanding of your own situation is so important. And I think, again, with this in mind, we are fortunate to have been working with Peppy for over a year now to support our members through menopause. So through the Peppy app, you can connect with real-life NHS-trained menopause practitioners who can offer guidance and advice. Access to Peppy, if you are a Vitality member, is available at no extra cost, so please do head to the member zone to find out more. But for anyone else listening today, there is information within here which is going to be super beneficial to you if you aren't a Vitality member. For our conversation today, we are lucky. We are joined by a genuine expert in this topic. Keris Marsden is the Director of Nutrition and Weight Management at Peppy. And not only that, though, Keris is also really open to sharing her own experiences and will be offering an insight into some of the practical tips and the realistic pieces of advice that have helped her. So Keris, thanks so much for your time today. It's great to have you on. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Shall I turn my camera on now? Or...
Please do. Don't leave me hanging any longer. Perfect.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamie. I'd have to say that was such a nice introduction about this topic as well, because it is a very sensitive topic. So thank you. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you to everyone who's joining us and giving up their lunchtime.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been really great as well to see the engagement that there's been so far. And I think that provides more proof to us that we do need to be supporting this topic. So for anyone that's watching live, at this point, I'll navigate you to the right-hand sides of your screen where you'll find a questions box. So if you want to input in there any of your comments and questions, Juliet's behind the scenes and she'll be replying to you, also forwarding these on to Keris and I so we can answer them throughout. And like I said, we have also considered your pre-registered questions and we'll be filtering these in as well. Final thing from me before we actually get going is if you also check out our handout section, you should find our May calendar of events where we're focusing on mental health awareness. So that should be a super popular event. All of our content is available to also make sure you share that far and wide. And hopefully you can help lots of people along the way. But at this point, Keris, I just need you to fill for me because what I'm going to attempt to do is to share my screen so that everyone can see your slides and I can pass over to you. So can you see your slides?
Yep, I can see the slides.
Perfect. I'll hand over to you and yeah, you can guide us through.
Okay. First of all, I just want to start off by giving, as Jamie said, a little bit of background information about myself. So I've worked in nutrition and health fitness for about 14 years. I started off as a personal trainer. I kind of had a brilliant experience with exercise personally, and so I knew that something that I wanted to train in and possibly do for a living. I then transitioned over into nutritional therapy after my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I just really wanted to help her a little bit more with nutrition and lifestyle help. We couldn't find much information, and I was really lucky to come across a talk by a cancer charity by a nutritional therapist, and I just knew there and then, hearing this really inspirational talk about things that people could do to look after their health, that I just knew that was what I wanted to do, and take on that role. And it was also delivered with so much kind of empathy and compassion as well, so that is why I transitioned over into nutritional therapy. But from a personal perspective, menopause has always been of a special interest to me because early menopause runs in my family. So my mum and her mum went through it in their late 30s, so it's always been on my radar. And towards the end, as I approached 40, I started to feel my hormones decline, and really started to look again at what could I do in terms of nutrition and lifestyle to support myself. But I share that story with you all because I've experienced firsthand some of the symptoms that many of you will be maybe going through or maybe slightly concerned about, and just how much that affects. Previously, I'd found I was quite a motivated person, didn't find it hard to exercise and eat well, and a lot of that changes when your hormones begin to falter a little bit. So again, I really struggled with things like night sweats and disrupted sleep. So then I was tired the next day and really couldn't find the energy to exercise. I felt my mood dive as a result of maybe because I wasn't exercising as much, or just again the hormone changes. So I can really identify with some of the struggles, and what I'll do today is really share some of the things that I work through with my clients. I've worked with clients one-to-one and done online programs, and at Peppy I put together the weight management programs and all the content for them as well. So yeah, so basically I can help you all in terms of the practical tips, but also some things that have worked for me. Jamie and I have had a quick chat about how we stay accountable, because we all have those days where we don't necessarily want to have the green smoothie or stick on the gym floor and head out for a workout. So hopefully that's also going to be beneficial.
Perfect. That sounds great. I think at this point, Keris, we're going to ask a poll to be launched. So we're quite interested, again, to have as much engagement as possible. So hopefully Juliet has just launched a poll on your screens. And really simply, again, hopefully we're conscious as well about this wording. We just want to understand from you right now whether you have experienced some weight changes during menopause, if that is something you've been through. If not, obviously, maybe this isn't one for you to answer just yet. But again, we don't need to know if it's plus or minus. We just want to understand if you have experienced changes in your weight. And looking at the results coming through at the moment, Keris, I'm not sure if you can see these, but 90% of people are saying yes, 5% no, and 8% I don't know. So a resounding yes, I think, is the overall. We'll let it run for a couple more seconds, but we're currently sitting at 86% yes, 5% no, 9% I don't know. So the vast majority who have either been through menopause or are going through menopause, they have experienced some form of change in their weight. Again, we're not going to necessarily know if it's plus or minus, but I think, Keris, our approach, like you said, is very much so about wholesome nutrition. It's about the nutrient density of foods rather than necessarily looking in too much detail about calories and things like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that we're going to discuss on this session is relevant to most people as well, not just as we transition through menopause. It gets more important as we age. Our nutritional needs just become a little bit greater to protect us from disease risk and things like that. So yeah, absolutely. It's going to be across the board applicable to most people. But I think one of the things that I realized with the hormone changes is it becomes a lot more non-negotiable as well, in terms of the exciting thing is there is so much that you can do with your nutrition and lifestyle to really begin to kind of mitigate and reduce some of those symptoms, and being consistent with them and incorporating them into your daily routine becomes more important. So what I'm going to talk through today is just some of the physiological changes that take place with menopause, so you understand them a little bit better. It would be lovely if we had more education on this. I think women at different life stages in terms of entering puberty and then adult life, early adult life, and then later on should have a mini course that we do. Maybe this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to change. These are some things that are really beneficial one day. I'm going to be discussing why you have to be careful about diets. It's a natural reaction as you gain weight, maybe, to think about there must be a menopause diet, there must be some kind of, you know, magic bullet that I've missed, and I'll be kind of walking you through what the research says on all of that. And then finally, we'll finish just by talking about effective weight management strategies and principles that you can start to implement. And again, just want to emphasize, these are not just about weight management, these are actually about improving your quality of life and your health and lowering your disease risk. So really important.
Perfect.
Okay, so we're going to start off looking at how menopause changes your body. So some of you have noticed maybe a shift in terms of your body composition. Like nodding at Jamie. Here's what's actually happening. And I think one of my frustrations with when you look and start to look into research into menopause, especially for myself, I was looking into it a little bit earlier probably than other people, is it's the picture that's painted is very negative, and it's almost like it's inevitable. There's you know, I've heard it explained as your metabolism drops, and almost you can feel quite helpless reading this information. And I know other women have spoken to me and asked me advice and said they're really dreading it, and I don't think it's I think this is, you know, something that we need to reverse ideally with more conversations about the menopause, and that is happening. Because actually what we don't see any big change in terms of your metabolic health, but as your hormones begin to decline, what we do see is maybe just less functionality is a better way to put it. So we don't regulate our energy as efficiently as we have done maybe in the past. So things like your blood sugars are altered slightly. Our bodies are not responding to hormones that are involved in this, like insulin, as well as they have done in the past. But again, there's a lot that we can do in terms of exercise and nutrition to actually work around this. It's also helpful to know that we, when you look at the stats on weight gain in menopause, it's estimated to be around 1 to 2 kilos, but actually it's not dissimilar to what we would gain with age, which is estimated to be about ½ kilo to 1 kilo a year. And again, this is because we just need to get those lifestyle factors more consistent now. There is a change in terms of weight distribution with menopause. So some women experience the weight moves more towards the middle, and you'll often see that it's you'll see a reduction in terms of around the breast area and around the legs and bum instead. And one of the issues with this is it does increase our risk of chronic diseases as well, having more weight around the middle. A big thing that we can do something about that has a huge impact on us as we age is that we begin to lose muscle mass. And I can't emphasize enough how much muscles are our best friend as we get a little bit older. And muscles are very cool in that what they will do is, maybe as your body's not responding to hormones like the one that regulates your blood sugar, insulin, your muscles are quite selfish, and if you use them and move them, they'll actually start to pull energy in from the bloodstream, pull glucose in because they need it to replenish. So the more we're moving and actually trying to build and retain muscle, which again is what I'm going to talk about today, the less we can, or the more we can have a positive impact in terms of things like energy and fatigue that many people struggle with in menopause. Your risk of diabetes increases, but again, this is where we can look at, for sure, nutrition and exercise. And that again is just with the drop in estrogen. I think estrogen is the main one that has that impact. And then also our hormones are really, I mean, one thing I realized as mine began to decline was just how far reaching the effects are on things like, even, I haven't mentioned here, cognitive function and your mood, but I definitely experienced a change in terms of my joint health. So you may have noticed things like your joints becoming a bit more dry and clicky, perhaps more inflammatory conditions. So I struggled a lot with things like tendinitis, which again becomes irritating. So when we are doing our exercise, we have to think about minimizing the risk of causing inflammation or again, kind of too much impact work as well. And again, this will decline with age, so our ability for all of our body's tissues to build and repair. But if we put the building blocks in through food, that can make a real difference. And then just finally, your risk of maybe some thyroid complications may increase through menopause, and also with age. And so it can be helpful just to maybe have that tested just annually is wise. If you've noticed any other symptoms, so usually things like constipation, feeling the cold, being very lethargic, perhaps losing your hair as well, could be signs that the thyroid maybe needs a little bit of support. And again, that's not a foregone conclusion, but it's just something to keep an eye on as the risk increases with menopause. And again, we know that nutrients like iodine and selenium are really important for thyroid, so making sure your diet is supporting that as well.
I think this slide answers a lot of questions that people have had, Keris, whereby there's been a lot of comments using the word unexplained, whereby people are continuing to eat and live and behave how they previously did, and they're not at this point understanding why they may be experiencing kind of weight gain. And I think all of these points here are kind of proof that, like you said, muscle is metabolic, so that requires energy to maintain. If you're losing some of that, you're going to require less energy input. So actually, I think the first thing to do is to figure out whether or not your energy intake demand is meeting your expenditure. And unfortunately, because of all these processes slowing down, essentially, the chances are you're not actually going to need as much fuel as you once did. So I know that the kind of advice that you're going to give today is going to touch on how to kind of fuel your body properly and things, but it seems like the first step to do might be just a realignment of the calculation of how many calories you need to consume on a daily basis, because you're not actually doing so much. So I don't know if you have any practical advice on that. So for example, as a normal kind of day-to-day piece of advice, I would suggest for anyone that wants to lose weight, they'd go into a 10% calorie deficit. And so say if you eat 2,000 calories a day, if you want to lose a little bit of weight, maybe you want to aim for 1,800. With menopause, is there like a factor number that you could put on how much you might look to reduce your calorie intake, or is it more so just having consciousness and awareness of how your weight's changing?
So I think first off, it's important to many women and now increasingly men as well, you have a kind of a previous relationship with things like calorie counting and dieting. And if you have a history of you've tried to lose weight many times and done all the calorie tracking and it's become quite stressful and created this very negative relationship with your body, the first question to ask yourself is, do you think tracking is going to be beneficial and give you, as you said, just an idea of energy awareness or help you with your portion sizes and exercise, how to increase your energy expenditure? Or is it going to trigger you back to just being super stressed and overly focused and really trying to control food? That again, there's lots of research where people end up kind of falling off the wagon and then just indulging because they're so tired and exhausted of counting calories and things like that. So first question is, do you want to track or not? What's your kind of previous relationship with that? And then for some of my clients, and I could split them down the middle, some have said it's been really helpful. What's really interesting is the maths around calorie calculating has shown that we're really bad at it. So we tend to overestimate our exercise expenditure through calories and underestimate our food intake and deliberately forget. I've definitely done this. I don't know if you have, Jamie, when I've experimented. So we cherry pick a little bit, and the calculations, the BMR calculations, it's really hard to actually know, factor in things like your muscle and body fat composition. So there's going to be a margin for error there. And then finally, it's impossible to really know how many calories you expend without being in some kind of laboratory controlled environment. And it's estimated they could be out by 500 calories possibly. But I did have one client who said an app told her to go down to 1,200. She reduced to what she believed was 15 and consistently lost weight with it. And for her, it was about, she'd already switched to many of the principles I advocate, but just felt she needed maybe a little bit more guidance on portion sizing. So
yeah, I think that's a brilliant answer. And again, it fits with our approach. And I would also say, don't underestimate the power of looking in the mirror, gauging how you feel. Like those factors are really important, and they'll be a good guide as to whether or not your weight's in the right place. So I really like that. Sorry for jumping in so much. I'll pass back to you.
No, it's good. And I think one of the reasons, I mean, it's good that you kind of brought it back to that, because most people do want to know about calorie deficits and things like that. And we're going to go through the principles, but I think what has the biggest impact on many people's health and possibly their body composition is actually the symptoms that come with the hormones declining. This was definitely my experience. So as I mentioned before, I'm not getting sufficient sleep. I'm tired in the morning, but I really lacked motivation. I had to, previously I hadn't needed any kind of well, I could just like get up and go and do my thing, but I really became disillusioned with it all, just didn't want to do it. So I had to, as I mentioned, employ more accountability tactics. Mood was low, and when your mood is low, you know, I'm the first to go and crave something. You know, usually my thing is chocolate, but you know, for some people it might be cheese and crisps, and you know, that kind of comfort food that actually gives us that temporary lift again. But then afterwards, you know, you kind of need more of it to keep elevating your mood, which isn't going to be helpful from a health perspective. But it did make it difficult, as I mentioned before, like you just didn't want to get up and have well, I didn't want to get up and have a green smoothie after a whole night of sweating and sleep disruption and things like that. I should mention as well, it's quite isolating as you're going through some of these symptoms because nobody else is. Everyone has, there's commonality, of course, but a lot of the time, you know, your symptoms are very unique and specific to you in terms of how they affect you. And what was quite helpful for me is actually starting to do things like going for a walk with friends. And many of my friends were not going through menopause because of my age, but they were having hormone issues, especially off the back of lockdown. So we would walk together and talk, and that was really, really helpful. If I didn't have the energy to exercise, I'd just do something simple like that instead. And things like your joint pain and inflammation can mean that it's just you're moving less, and you're generally not expending much energy as a result of all of these different symptoms, maybe not putting as much effort into your exercise sessions, and it's completely understandable why. And then of course you may be just finding yourself wanting more of those kind of comfort foods as well. So I think this is one of the factors why many people are experiencing more significant weight gain than possibly we should. Those physiological changes are relevant, but they're very slow and small, and shouldn't be this big drastic change. Whereas this can affect you quite quickly, I think.
Perfect. We are getting a lot of questions, Kerry, so I promise that we will do our best to get through them. But at this point, we're just going to offer out another question to the audience. And this, again, is where I think people are really challenged in that everyone has an opinion, and there's so many people giving different forms and pieces of advice. So we want to know at the moment, kind of like, do you believe that there is an ideal menopause diet? Is there a diet that you follow? Just input anything that you like into that questions box, and we'll keep an eye on that. I think it will help us as we get into the next stage where we kind of talk about the more practical advice. And Kerry, just for a heads up for you, we're getting loads of questions on things like vitamins and supplements, collagen, people experiencing drastic weight changes, HRT, are you able to eat fruit? Like, these are all the kinds of questions around the specifics of the kind of detail of what we actually eat. So I think for this next section, it would be good if we can kind of like focus and realign people a bit, because I'm looking at the comments now. There's a lot. Chocolate and wine, someone's put. I think that's probably,
that's got to be there.
Yeah, but honestly, there's too many to look at, and I regret asking the question because now I can't keep up. But ultimately, there's so many different opinions and views, which is, I think, if we can kind of give a more broad overview of why they don't work and what our kind of streamlined advice would be, that'd be great.
Okay, so if you just click on the slide. So I think one of the things to be, I don't like the term diets because, again, as someone who's felt a lot of pressure throughout my entire life to look a certain way and you know, conform and be a certain size, and I've tried lots of diets in my kind of young adult life and gradually came around to just, you know, some of the principles we're going to talk through today. But even the research is now showing that if you reduce your calorie intake too significantly, all it does is your body starts this kind of fight back process where we see an upregulation of appetite, and then without even realizing it, you start to move less. If you drop them too much, you just won't have the energy to exercise either, and that is generally the feedback I get from some people. It's interesting, some studies have identified for every kilo you lose, your appetite increases by 100 calories. So again, if we're doing this kind of slowly, and this is what I dislike about the kind of diet concept, it's usually, you know, it's a fast sell. You'll do it in 2 weeks, you'll do it in so many months. It's temporary, so you're going to stop it at some point. Well, what happens then? You know, usually people will resume, you know, their body composition goes back to what it was before. And also they're very prescriptive and restrictive, and what they can create is something that is referred to, I refer to it, and it's even researchers now talking about diet stress, which is when they've done studies comparing women who put a lot of effort into trying to lose weight with exercise and eating a certain way and weighing themselves constantly, compared to women who just describe themselves as healthy eaters and just have this what's termed healthy restraint around food and generally enjoy exercising and staying active. there's changes in terms of their physiology, their chemistry, and the women who are on the diets have higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol. They tend to be more overweight, so this is where I think it starts working against you, probably because you maybe fall in and out of following the principles or the rules, whatever it might be, and then kind of falling off the wagon. And then we also know that what the body might do is, if we go through these periods of under eating and then stopping, the body might preferentially store fat rather than muscle, because there's just this there's this lack of consistency with your nutrients. But also that high stress hormones in these women who are dieting causes them to excrete calcium, which, remember, in menopause, we're really thinking about bone health and bone density. We want to look after nutrients like calcium that are really important. And that's another thing about dropping out entire food groups, or it could be a macronutrient, so carbohydrates or fat, or you could be dropping out, again, whatever it might be that the diet is recommending. There's a risk that you'll get some nutrient deficiencies. And again, we want to support function. I often say, compare cells in the body to like a mobile phone, in that when you think about your mobile, it needs apps, it needs charging, it needs a case, it needs all these things, and we look after it, we care for it, we charge it on a regular basis. And your cells are just the same. They need vitamins and minerals, antioxidants to repair, macronutrients, hydration. They need everything else. They need to recharge and rest, so sleep and things like that as well. And that's what we should focus on, again, really throughout our entire life, but certainly as we age, it needs to become the focus.
Perfect. I think I also find it funny how it's called a diet, but everyone follows a diet of some sort. It's just what you eat, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk through some effective nutrition strategies, and hopefully these will cover some of your questions. So again, in the research, they've been, Jamie, you're probably aware of this, they're constantly comparing what's the best way to lose weight. Is it low carb? Is it low fat? And when they match it and do very controlled, high standard studies, they see it doesn't make a difference. As long as you mentioned, you're reducing that energy intake and creating a deficit, and you've got the expenditure there as well. But what has been shown to make a huge difference is when they start looking at compliance and kind of long term. And it seems to be that the type of food you're eating in terms of quality is really important. So again, if you're just losing weight using bars, shakes that don't have any nutrition, there's a good chance eventually there'll be things like your mood and energy will drop, and it'll be very hard to sustain it. Whereas if you change the quality of your food to a more whole foods diet, which I'm going to give you some more details on in a second, that's been shown to make quite a big difference. And one of the reasons is it helps with appetite regulation. And I think it's helpful to know that over the last 20, 30, 40 years, the food industry has worked really hard to find out what it is that will make you overeat. And they've put it into a lot of foods because, of course, it's a win-win for them. So what they do is combine things like salt, fat, sugar, something like a crunchy texture or creaminess. And this lights up our brains when we eat it. It feels amazing. So again, if you're there with your low mood and you can go and have something like a Snickers bar, for example, feels great in the moment because it's tapping into these reward centers in the brain. So the term to describe this is food reward. And what that does is it doesn't satiate you. You don't feel full after having it. You just want more and more and more. It's a survival mechanism that we've had in us to make us hunt and gather when we needed to. That's thousands of years ago. And it still exists. And so we have to think about the foods that we're eating and try to go for options that do help regulate our appetite, that do make us feel full. And one of them you can see here is protein. So I'm a huge fan of really increasing your protein when you're looking to manage your weight, but also as we age, that's going to help you with increasing your muscle mass. And also protein is the building blocks of your brain chemicals. It's part of your immune system. There are more and more studies just emerging on how, as we age, protein is that one macronutrient we should really be focusing on. And studies have suggested around 1.5 grams of protein per kilo of body weight can be helpful. So you can just do that calculation, and I'll show you how much protein is in food in a second. Any questions, Jamie?
No, there's actually hundreds of questions. Yeah, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to look at kind of specific foods and things like that here. But one thing that's come up quite a lot as well is sort of like our opinions on low carbohydrate or ketogenic diets. And I think that just from like my physiological background, and I'll definitely pass to you, Keris, after, essentially like The reason why a low carbohydrate diet might work is because if you imagine the macronutrients in your diet, you have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. They're the 3 essentials. If you take a third of those away, the chances are you're going to be in a calorie deficit because you're not eating as much food. And that's the food which actually, like Keris was talking about with satiety, proteins and fats will keep you fuller for longer. Carbohydrates you can naturally eat much more of because they are your body's fuel system. But my argument for that would be that's exactly why you need to include them in your diet. And Keris is going to talk through here the types of food which are right for you and how you can consume carbohydrates in the right way. Similarly, a ketogenic diet, if you're just mainly eating fats and proteins, again, it's the same thing really as a low carbohydrate diet. It may well get you into that calorie deficit, which will mathematically make you lose weight because you'll be in a calorie deficit. Ultimately, if you're in a deficit, you're going to lose weight. But I really like Keris's phone analogy. Are you fueling your body in the right way? If you're looking to exercise, are you able to perform as you like to? And I think I have a more performance background, but I always apply this to work with everyday people, is that you need to use food as fuel first. So supplements, vitamins, and minerals, can you get everything you need from the food? And second to that, are you fueling your body in the right way to perform for what you need it to do? And I think if you go on those overly restrictive diets, they become very difficult to sustain. When you go out for meals, they become problematic. They often are a bit of a challenge and a burden on you, which can add to stress. And those are all the things that you're not trying to do. So Keris and I's approach is very much so, again, it's balanced, it's sustainable, and all those things that people struggle with. But hopefully now we can give you some practical advice on like how much of each you need to be having. And I think this pyramid, Keris, is a good example of like, this is how to just do it, and you don't have to be extreme all of the time. And that's, I don't know what your view is, but that's what my opinion is of those other diets, is that they are a little bit too restrictive, and that likely causes tendencies for people to have periods where they just can't follow a diet at all, and then they end up reverting back to square one.
Yeah, and that's what the research shows. So when they start to follow people at, you know, kind of beyond 6 months to more like 12 months to 2 years, it's really interesting. There's one comparing the Atkins diet, the kind of very famous low carb diet, with Zone, which is more about specific macronutrient percentages, and then just a completely plant-based diet. And they found after a year that the Atkins group had the best weight loss, but they were actually following Zone by that point. Their carbs had just crept up and up and up and up, so they weren't doing the same recommendation. And I think you're absolutely right in that. Just going back to the food reward, I think the first thing that's really helpful from a kind of appetite regulation perspective is to start preparing your own food and to change the sources of your carbohydrates and fats and proteins, and less of that manufactured processed food. And with your carbohydrates, some people just feel like a lower carbohydrate model might be helpful, but even just taking out flour-based carbohydrates, so things like bread and pasta that provide a lot of energy per serving, but for a small amount of food, and swapping in more things like vegetables and legumes and whole grains, which provide less energy but a high volume of food, so help you feel full, give you lots of vitamins and minerals. Just those simple swaps might be the first step that you do, because as you've just mentioned, carbohydrates we need, they're actually a big part of joint function. They're part of the fluids that you have around your joints. So if you've got those dry, clicky joints, we want to make sure we support that. And your immune system and brain function, we need about 130 grams of glucose a day just for our brains to think. So I think you might want to try, first of all, change the source, lower it slightly, perhaps take out, this is something I do personally and my other half do, is we try and limit hyperpalatable foods in the week, because we get complacent, we'll be really busy. He's got no off switch with bread, so he's like, don't bring bread into the house, he's just a bread monster. And you know, he might, and he just knows it makes him feel bloated when he overeats it, and he will eat like a loaf in one sitting. Yeah. So
great.
We get it on a Sunday morning, we get a sourdough loaf, we share it. If we're lucky, we freeze half. If I leave the room, he eats the rest. But just,
I think it's good advice. It's also
sorry.
Yeah, and I think it's something that I always encourage people to do, is to take every day as a fresh start. So you probably can't eat the same things every single day. So if you've got a day where you're doing more activity or more exercise, then those are the days when you maybe have a little bit more carbohydrate. And can you even go into a little bit more detail and have it before your training or before your workout, so that you've got the fuel for it? And I think that's something which is really important to do, is to make sure that you can't necessarily do the same things every day, but you can change your approach by looking at the formula of what you can adjust. And by doing that, you're not going to be in the surplus, but you're going to be fueling in the right way as well.
Absolutely. And I think and a really interesting experiment for people to do is also, you know, to kind of go back to the food reward concept, and then I'll talk through this pyramid, is if you think about, for example, if I just Jamie asked you to eat like a bowl of boiled potatoes with nothing on, so no oil, no salt, nothing, you'd be like eating them, but eventually boiled potatoes would get quite boring because your body would kick in, your appetite would go, well, you've kind of had enough, you don't need any more. It does this judgment of what energy requirements you have. But if you actually deep fry those potatoes in oil and cover them in salt, vinegar and ketchup, that all gets written off. And suddenly your brain takes over and your brain's like, no, these are nice, keep going, keep going. And that's, you know, we can think about how we're cooking food and how we're eating, and most of the time try and think about supporting that natural mechanism. But equally, there has to be a little bit of what you fancy in there. I think the worst thing I see people do is get so restrictive. And as you said, over 7 days, you can just have these, you know, Friday night you go out with the family and you just relax a little bit and have a little bit of what you like. And just think about that balance. It's about, I personally, whenever I've tried to give up chocolate, I get so far and then I just go and eat a ton of chocolate. So I've realized actually just having a small amount of chocolate every day really works for me. But that's kind of my personal experience. So have a little think about that. And with a lot of clients, they come to me. My mum's a great one. She's kind of like one of my most insightful clients because I get to see behind the scenes. And she was kind of struggling with her body composition as her hormones changed, and she said, you know, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And what it turned out to be is she just loves things like eating crisps and chocolate late at night. And when we just took that out and she added in, she started to walk a mile a day, huge difference. So most of the meals were okay, but there were just these little tweaks that she made. But I think a lot of people, if you step back, it doesn't have to be as hard as we think it is. There's just a couple of key changes that you can make that can make a big difference.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah, and I'll just go, so with this pyramid, it is just really to explain to you, you know, get the water in, hydration is key. Then think about getting, I'm more of a fan of, you know, like 7, 8, 9, 10 servings of vegetables, especially when we're thinking about weight management. You can get really creative with them. You can have vegetable soups, stews, ratatouille, courgette, cauliflower rice, those things. You could still have rice, but mix it with loads of vegetables. So give yourself that big volume of food. And make those at least half your plate. Then you've got your healthy carbs, protein and fat. And again, we're looking at making sure you get those healthy fats in, like your omega-3s, avocado, nut seeds, olive oil, lots of anti-inflammatory benefits, brilliant for things like joint health and cognitive function. And then I've said here that in moderation, you might want to have some natural sugars like some fruit. And again, with fruit, with carbohydrates, it's kind of also a mini experiment figuring out which ones work for you and your tolerance of them. And if you are pre-diabetic and a little bit concerned about this, you can always just test your blood sugar levels, which many of my clients have done. You can buy a monitor and just do it for 2 weeks and just see, is a banana okay, or does it send my blood sugar like way too high? So that's just a nice little tip if you've got to that point. But remember, if you're always eating your fruit or whatever it might be with some protein and some fiber and fats, it also changes how it affects you in terms of energy as well. Again, if you like alcohol, try and do it in moderation. Big fan of coffee. So it's a rich source of antioxidants in that diet. And then finally, just, you know, you go out with a friend and you want to have that croissant, then have it. And, you know, ideally walk to the coffee shop and walk back again, and that makes a difference. So
yeah, no, I think it's really a good place to start with us. And Keris, I appreciate I just left you hanging then for a second. I didn't respond because I've just been noting down all the questions. And what we'll do is we'll save kind of 10-15 minutes and we'll do really, really quick fire, because there's lots of questions on like the right cooking oils or protein shakes. But if we just keep working through, like you mentioned 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for example, if you weigh 100 kilos, you're going to look for about 150 grams of protein. In terms of what this looks like, can you just talk us through it? And also, like, I know we've also got a slide coming up about like constructing a plate, and portion size has come up quite a lot as well.
Okay. So yeah, so just in terms of the protein, again, when I suggest increasing protein to my clients, sometimes they say I've had an egg with breakfast, but you can see an egg is only 6 grams. So as Jamie just did the maths there, if you're 60 kilos, you're at 1.5, it's 90 grams of protein a day. If you have a significant amount of weight to lose, you might want to work more towards your ideal weight. Or what I would suggest is just eating protein to the point where you feel so full you don't want any more. So again, as long as you're getting maybe 20-30 grams in 3 times a day. You could also use things like natural yogurt, which is really rich in protein, as a snack or as a dessert. That's a great way to add another 15-20 grams as well. Then you'll often see that beneficial effect in terms of it, just your energy is much more stable and you don't tend to feel hungry in between meals. We're going to talk about meal timing in a second. So that slide just gives you an idea of how you might construct that. And just going back to the point on protein powders for me are a functional food. And so although I'm suggesting this whole foods template, so that's like eating the food we've been eating for a very long time and minimizing that kind of manufactured processed food. But protein powders can just be super convenient. So you could probably get 30 grams using something like whey or pea, rice, hemp. It doesn't matter if you're okay with dairy. Whey protein has lots of research behind it in terms of, again, weight management, appetite regulation, but also great for your immune system, sports performance. If you don't want to have dairy or you don't tolerate it too well, it's a little bit lower in lactose, so most people can do whey isolate even if you can't do milk. Then you could opt for something like a rice protein or a pea protein. And again, these can be made into a nice smoothie for a dessert, or a smoothie bowl I often sometimes make with some berries. So they can be a kind of nice pleasure food as well. So that just gives you an idea. And one I've not put on here actually, Jamie, but I don't know if you've ever tried it, is tempeh. Tempeh is really high in protein. It's a
I was actually going to mention there about so if you're vegan, vegetarian, obviously these options here look like if you're constructing a meal that you might have a bigger chunk, which is your protein. And I'm not going to steal Keris's info that she's going to share later, but like you separate a plate maybe in a slightly different way. If you're vegan or vegetarian, what you might want to do is you actually look for protein sources within lots of different things that you're eating, so it's not just in one chunk. So tempeh is a great example of where you can get tofu as well, where you can get a big source. But if you don't want to just have like your protein separated, you can have quinoa, pulses, beans, lentils, grains. For example, I think a slice of seeded whole wheat bread has probably got about 6 grams of protein in as well. So you just might not look from one source. There's probably going to be a few different areas that you get your protein from. And that goes as well if you're a meat eater. And I think that kind of ties us quite nicely into the sort of meal timing as well. And there's a lot of people that sweat the small stuff, I think, on this, Keris. So it'd be good to get your opinion on fasting, because that's definitely something that's come up, but also the optimal times to be eating, if there are any.
Yeah, so most people, many women I've worked with have resorted to intermittent fasting as a way to lose weight, and the kind of typical model that most people seem to be drawn towards is to skip breakfast and eat usually from 12 till 8 o'clock at night. One thing that I'd say about that is the research that's been done looking at fasting generally. One of the concerns is that you will start to, depending on how much you're doing it, eat into your muscle mass at some point. So you definitely want to make sure that you are meeting your protein requirements, and you might also want to add strength training in there to preserve muscle mass, or make sure you're not doing too much things like cardio, which again might kind of reduce it. Another factor is that actually, we're very sedentary usually in the evening. So if you are having most of your energy intake later in the day, there's a chance, again, if you're slightly insulin resistant with the estrogen dropping, that this might just hang around in the bloodstream and cause high blood sugars, high triglycerides. It could affect your sleep negatively. My personal experience when I experimented was I tended to overeat when I got home. I was just too hungry after, every nutritionist dabbles a little bit. I'm sure you have, Jamie, with a few of these things. And actually, when they're looking at circadian rhythm, which is our sleep-wake cycle, how our hormones work, it seems that in the day, we're really well adapted to taking energy from food and using it to be active, using it for muscle function, brain function, those types of things. So we're much more efficient at that. And then in the evening, what our body starts doing is actually freeing up more energy. So we start to make glucose, we start to free up our fat stores. So we could get an energy overload in the bloodstream overnight by eating too late. So I actually often suggest that people look at more time-restricted eating, which is just try and finish dinner as early as you can. And then same thing, kind of, basically then have a 12 to 13 hour fast overnight. Both have been shown to be beneficial and not too hard to do, not too stressful. So count 12 hours, have your breakfast, but also think about fasting in between meals. So again, we've developed this kind of snacking culture. I've heard statements like eat every 3 to 4 hours to boost your metabolism and things like that, and we really don't need to. So in between meals, if you've got the protein, we've got the nutrients in there, fats and fiber, you should be able to go for at least 3 hours if you've eaten substantially, if not 4 to 5. And that's really good for your digestive system as well, to have that nice gap. So time restricted eating, we're just closing our eating window slightly. It also means you've got the energy to exercise and the energy, you know, to kind of go about your day, and probably even if you are working out, you'd probably put a bit more effort into it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like I naturally probably fast for 12 hours because I'm not that hungry in the morning. Like breakfast is just called breakfast because it's breaking the fast, and it doesn't have to be within a set time window. So I think it's one of those things that, like Kara said, it might work for you because you're going to reduce the amount of hours that you can eat for. So naturally, you're probably going to get into that deficit. But also, do make sure that you're aware of what you need to function every day. If you train early in the morning and you're not performing as well without it, then make sure you're getting the right fuel in for your body as well. But we'll just kind of wrap up this kind of final section around a bit more broad information, Keris, I guess, about just like general healthy lifestyle habits for weight management.
Yeah, so I often get lots of questions about exercise. What's the best type of exercise to do? Really, one thing I just want to emphasize is it's whatever you can do consistently, which is usually something that you enjoy and it's convenient. But a few things that are just really helpful would be, first of all, walking and moving more across your day. It's really beneficial. I think the one thing I see is people say, I've got 3 exercise sessions in. That's 3 hours of your week. If you think about how many hours we have in the week. And everyone underestimates just how much walking to the shops, cleaning the kitchen. Now that we're working from home, I have these little breaks where I'll go and just hang out the washing or kind of sweep up the floor. I've refused, lots of friends have got cleaners and I refuse because this is my little kind of, these are my movement snacks that I have across the day. And it does make a difference. So if you're really tired, just walk, and just walk as much as you possibly can and get some friends involved and track your steps, maybe give yourself a step count target. The next thing will be strength training. So anything that's going to build and preserve muscle. So strength training, again, if you can, I see lots of people start to invest around this time in things like weighted blankets, expensive supplements, and these are good, but I think one of the best things I ever did was invest in a personal trainer who taught me how to deadlift, squat, do a proper push-up, be confident in a gym using different bits of equipment. And the more you're training, again, those bigger muscles in your body, what you're doing is essentially controlling your blood sugars, but also we know that muscle has a really positive impact on bone. So if you build muscle, you're actually improving your bone density. You're actually building up your tiny ligaments and tendons. So it could be really helpful, again, minimizing your risk of tendonitis and joint issues. So I think if you know how to do those exercises, I'm a big fan of just keep it simple. Especially for me, it was I would literally say I'm going to squat, push, pull, do something to get my heart rate up 4 times, 20 minutes. That's it. So I get myself, when I was feeling a bit kind of low on energy, just really short workout targets to do. But covering all those big muscles. So my back and legs and bum would give me the biggest bang for my buck in terms of having a positive impact on my blood sugar regulation.
Yeah, I think that's something that, again, everyone should be aware of, is that as you get into older age and as you become dependent on other people, it's often not your heart health that means that you become vulnerable. It's the fact that you can't get off out of a chair or you can't reach to a shelf. And I think the theme for World Menopause Day last year was about osteoporosis and bone density. Weight training is essential for that. And like we said at the start, kind of increasing your muscle mass is a great way to increase your metabolic rate. So I think I always hear 4% of your day is 1 hour. If you can't find 1 hour, I think the key really is that accumulation of exercise, and that can come through daily habits and exercise. I think you said, what did you say, Karen? Is an exercise snack or a?
Oh yeah, so movement snacking is,
Movement snack.
there's actually really good research on just doing 2 to 6 minutes of exercise before you eat, especially if you're pre-diabetic, have high blood sugars, will lower your post-meal blood sugar levels. So you could do something like 2 minutes of body weight squats. You could do, if you had an exercise bike, something like Tabata, you know, warm up first if you can. And interestingly, I've just started tracking my own blood sugars again. When my hormones change, I can feel a bit shaky, and I know I need to maybe have a quick look at what's going on. One thing I've noticed affects me really significantly is just sitting still. I'm a bit of a nightmare. Once I get writing and researching, I'll sit for 4 hours. I'm terrible. And another reason I weight train is to improve my posture, which you can imagine I get a little bit rounded. So I go to the gym and I do lots of pulling to strengthen my back. But I tested them yesterday and they weren't out of range, but they were higher than I've ever seen because I just sat for 5 hours after my lunch. So if you just take a little break, do some squats, do some yoga, go for a little lap around the block, get a dog if you need that accountability, like it does really change how you regulate energy.
Yeah, I think that these are all like, there's so many specific questions, and I'm going to get to this last slide. But actually, it comes down to those fundamentals that you've said. And when you've got like a pyramid of importance, the questions around supplementation, can I eat fruit? Are carbs bad? Like they come really, really high up the pyramid. Ultimately, you need to get the basics right. Once you've exhausted those, then you can look at other areas. But we just wanted to finish, Karis, before we get into those questions, more so around like how mindset can be affected. So I don't know if you can quickly just bring us through this, because I think it starts there. When you get that bit right, everything else falls into place.
Yeah, so I think that the main thing to look at now is in terms of menopause health generally, it's about just starting to factor in daily habits that really support your body and support, you know, your kind of your mindset, your mood health as well. Just interesting what you said about, you know, do you have enough time? One of the key bits of advice I give to a lot of clients is say no more. So they are constantly helping, you know, it might be from a work perspective, reaching deadlines, maybe in a care sandwich, looking after parents, also children, friends. And if you're helping everybody else all the time, spreading yourself thinly, but don't have any time for your own self-care, it's just not sustainable. It's not going to last. Your symptoms, your body will at some point call time on it. It's happened to me in the past. You know, many people have had burnout and things like that, where we're just not focusing on topping up our own cup. So that's really important. And I think if you're overwhelmed by it all, just step back and go, well, what doesn't intimidate me? What's easiest? And again, for me, even going through a period of burnout, I just went back to walking, and that's all I did every day. Somewhere nice. I was in London, so it was parks. I found woodland, more social time, things like that. Made a big difference to me wanting to eat better, because then I wasn't so stressed, and, you know, kind of stress really lowers all our feel-good chemicals, and then we want comfort food. So actually, I think go upstream and think about some of the things that might make you feel happier, more relaxed. You know, what could be those low-hanging fruits that you could put in place that would mean it might be just changing breakfast, more protein at breakfast that gets you more stable, and a little 30-minute walk, and that's it. Focus on that for the next couple of months, and then you can start to factor in more changes as you feel better. And I should just add, you know, if your menopause symptoms are stopping you from doing this, then obviously speak to your GP, go and see a menopause practitioner. If you're a member of Vitality, obviously you can check in with the menopause team in Peppy as well, because, you know, the two together could work really well. If you're not able to make the lifestyle changes because of those symptoms, then obviously kind of speak to somebody professional about that. But from an accountability, sorry, go on, Jamie.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's really good advice. That's really the key to all of this as well, because when there are people that have got concerns about anything which we aren't covering, that's, if you're asking the question here, you should be asking the question elsewhere. So definitely reiterate that point about getting support wherever you can.
And I'll just fire through these points. Finally, is find ways to be accountable. We had a little chat, Jamie. I said at points I've slept in my gym kit. I got my partner to take my bag to the gym and put it in a locker, so I had to go. He'd go and train first, and I had to go afterwards. But meeting people, that's the big one for me. If I arrange to meet somebody, I don't want to let them down, so I'll, you know, meet people for a walk. So find ways. If you struggle, you might have to pay for a session in advance or something like that. Sign up to a group program. Social support has been shown in all of the weight management research. If your nearest and dearest, your partners, people around you are not on board with your changes, it can be problematic. So it's about having conversations about how important it is to you and getting some help. And that can be with the cooking. You shouldn't be making several different meals for lots of different people, ideally, and really stressing yourself as you're trying to follow one set of guidelines. The recommendations I've made would be suitable for everyone, and just adapt them slightly. So with my other half, he gets a mountain of rice. I use my fist-sized serving of carbohydrates. He'll pour olive oil all over his food once we've served it up and plated it up. I have a little bit on mine. So you can adapt the energy value of food to meet with their needs, but you don't have to have different meals necessarily. And finally, just try and make less decisions about your nutrition and exercise. That's why sitting on a Sunday, booking in your exercise classes or booking it in your diary, this is what I'm doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, this is when I'm going to go for a walk. Batch cooking, even if you just, you know, cook 3 fillets of salmon and 3 fillets of chicken or something like that, have convenient stuff in like microwave rice, so that you don't have to keep thinking. You know, once you have decision fatigue, you're tired, and you open the fridge, if there's something super tasty, hyper palatable, easy, or the takeaway, you know, you're going to go for it. So try and make those decisions about your nutrition and exercise in advance, so it's a lot easier. And think about that food horizon. So again, if you get stressed at work and have, you know, a bag of peanut M&Ms on your desk, you're going to eat them all. Like it's a given. It would be for me. So I'm doing M&Ms on my desk.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's really good information. At this point, Keris, if we could, I'm going to try and reiterate just a couple of points that people have sort of double checked. One of them, a lot of people asking about protein. So how much again? So just to remind you, it's 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. So work out how much you weigh, multiply that by 1.5. That's how much you're aiming for a day. A few more people asking about protein shakes. Ultimately, we kind of, our angle would be that food always comes first. So instead of having a protein shake, can you look at something like a Greek yogurt, which has probably got a similar amount of protein, but it's actually going to be natural and something which gets you in the habit of kind of eating rather than drinking. There's lots of things as well, really small questions, but I want to just quickly to kind of summarize, go through. You mentioned about cupped handful of carbohydrates. I know we've said palm-sized portion of protein. Can you just explain to us protein, fats, carbs, veg, how you'd actually build a plate using something as simple as your hand?
Yeah, we did have a slide, but it wasn't in, was it, Jamie? Sorry, you mentioned it, and I was like, there's no slide.
Sorry, yeah, we've got a hand, so we can show.
Okay. Yeah, so what I would say is protein is easy. It's kind of those portion sizes I just showed you. Try and get your 20 grams. So a lot of people say palm size. It's a nice measure. And then with your carbs, fist size, and you can even do things like get a little ramekin dish. So again, you know, rice is absolutely fine, but the problem is if you go out and eat, you know, usually dishes are predominantly rice on the plate and then a little bit of protein, and because it's expensive. So again, your own food prep or making your own food a lot more is a lot easier to follow these principles. So fist size of carbs and then just a thumb of fat. So again, if you wanted to add a tablespoon of olive oil or just a handful of nuts onto your food or half an avocado. So again, just that sensible portion size and just be consistent with that. And that intuitive approach does seem to be what most people prefer. And dropping out the snacks, you know, very, very simple.
Perfect. I like that. Another question that we've had a lot of is around cooking oil. So just a simple one, I think, for us to answer. Is there a good choice, a bad choice? I think, again, with calorie tracking, that's where people often forget calories, is they don't put things in like cooking oils. And someone asked a good tracker, so something like MyFitnessPal would always probably work really well. But do you have a preference on cooking oils, or is it kind of just whatever works for you?
So again, I think olive oil, very good, even though there's a bit of, oh, it shouldn't be heated, it's so high in polyphenols and antioxidants, it actually mitigates any slight damage that you get from heating it. Coconut oil, butter, saturated fats generally more stable when heated. And then, again, I wouldn't overthink it too much. I tend to suggest avoiding things like crisp and dry vegetable oils. But your point's very good in that I'd also just minimize oils generally, because as you heat an oil, it damages. And then once it's going into the body, it can kind of create a little bit of cell damage. So I often say low temperature cooking is best, but if you can cook more with water, so that could be stewing, slow cooking, steaming, and even saute with vegetable stock, takes the energy value down, but stops some of those compounds, which can be slightly damaging. And yeah, you're right to be slightly aware of it. Some of my clients have asked me, one of my clients, her husband was cooking, which was amazing, but he was really heavy handed with the fat. She said everything's kind of swimming in oil, which is lovely. It's like, you know, it's just slight adaptations. It's quite easy to do.
Yeah, I think roughly 1 tablespoon of oil will probably give you about 100 calories worth of energy. So there's quick wins to be made there, Keris. I could stay all day, but I probably shouldn't do that because I'm conscious of everyone's time. But we have covered a lot there, and hopefully that's been really helpful for everyone watching. I think ultimately there's so many questions and there's so many kind of like real specific details that people are being told, and what we're trying to do is just rebalance and realign and say that get the fundamentals right, you know, like, and I think something that I've definitely learned through doing work on menopause is that sleep is a problem, like hot sweats, feeling lethargic, like they're all things that are there and your nutrition can support, but ultimately it isn't going to solve those problems. So I think something that I really want to help people understand, and this is particularly probably focused on men, is that actually to support women to allow those days to happen where they're not up for it, and how you can be more kind to them. I know we say that a lot, but how you can help them come back the next day. And I think, Keris, I think I'd love to get your final thoughts on this, but about how you can kind of roll with how your body's feeling, adjust to that, nourish it in the right way, but also accept that it's not always going to be exactly how you want it, but that doesn't mean the next day it is. Do you think that's kind of a good overall message for us?
Yeah, this is a little bit random, but I'm just reading a book called conversations on love, which at night I can't read anything to do with nutrition. It just wires me. So I read about love. It's lovely. But in the book, it's meeting people and relationships and the importance of love with friends, actually, which is really nice. But they talk about the fact, never try to force and control the process too much, because generally it never works how it should do. And the reason I mention that is it's just the same with weight management, with nutrition. If we try to really control the process and get really attached to the outcome and really attached to, you know, we said we're going to go to the gym 4 times a week, it creates a lot of negative emotions, a lot of stress, and we know where that leads us to, just cravings and lack of energy and really kind of, you know, negative relationships with our body and ourselves. So I think there's actually real skill to being much more intuitive and waking up and thinking, I was going to go to the gym today, but actually I think I need a nice walk and I need to phone a friend. I need some social connection. It's been a bad night of sleep, but do you know what? I'm also going to eat my protein today to make me feel fuller. Sleep deprivation does make you a little bit hungry. So there's some key things that are going to be easy to do that you can factor in, but you've got to be kind to yourself. You've got to ease back and don't be too kind of even prescriptive. I mentioned prescription with diet. We can do the same with trying to be healthy. You know, we just get too carried away with it. So you're absolutely right. Take each day at a time. And if one day went bad, just let it go. Honestly, just let it go, because this is the rest of your life. It's not like we're doing this for 4 weeks to, you know, for a holiday. This is the rest of your life. This is your body. You're stuck with it. Sorry if you're gonna end up in a conflict every now and then, but it's still the best bit of kit you're ever going to own, and you need to look after.
Best way to end it possible. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today and for all of your engagement. We really hope you found this session helpful, and hopefully you're in a better place now as well and you've got some sort of plan to work towards. But I really want to reiterate though that the most important factor is that you're aware of your situation, what areas of challenges you face, and how you can work with them better. I think that's the key to this. So again, please head to the handout section. You'll be greeted with a feedback form on the way out. We'd love to get your thoughts on this. Keris, thank you for sharing all of your time and knowledge. I'm sure we should probably do more because this is a super important topic. So thank you. And to everyone watching, have a great afternoon and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.